My name is Mert van der Gaast. I'm a project coordinator at NABC and one of the main focal points for the Match project in the Netherlands. And I will be your moderator for today's session. So let's get started. So once again, a very warm welcome to you all. And I see that we're joined by some new and by some familiar faces. As you might know, today's webinar is organized on National Diversity Day. And on this day, we celebrate initiatives that contribute to an inclusive and diverse work environment and embracing our individual differences. A company with a workplace that is diverse has employees with a very wide range of experiences and characteristics, including gender, race, ethnicity, age, religious beliefs, and so on. And nurturing a workplace culture that promotes diversity and inclusivity is a great way also to boost the employee morale and its engagement. But it's also for us very good to realize that it's a good investment in the future. So in today's modern and global connected society, workplace diversity is becoming more and more a necessity. So I think it's interesting. In today's session, we will address some of the competitive advantages to diversity. One of such is, of course, it can result in increased profits, productivity, creativity, and increased problem-solving skills. Similarly, in an increasingly competitive market, embracing diversity also allows companies to attract top talent. And this is a topic that we will further address by explaining to you the Match project, which will be presented by Maya McKenzie. We will also have a panel discussion, and we are joined by a very interesting and diverse set of speakers who will share with us their diversity story, their experience and advice, followed by a Q&A session. And I would like to give a warm welcome once again to Kim Okamara, founder and CEO of OMEC, Dennis Jarker, senior manager at PwC, and Robert Blau, consultant and partner at AIM for Interim Management. But let's begin today's session by presenting to you the Match project. I would like to give the floor to Maya McKenzie, project focal point for the Match project at IOM the Netherlands. And in the Netherlands, NABC and IOM are executing this project together. Maya, the floor is now all yours.
Thanks so much, Mirta. And thanks everyone for joining us on this rainy afternoon. This is our third webinar to address the Match project. And today we have timed it to celebrate Dutch Diversity Day, as Mirta has outlined. So thanks for joining. I'm aware that your mics and cameras are not visible to each other. I know who you are, but you don't know each other. So feel free in the chat to introduce yourself so that everybody else is aware of who is joining this session. I will give an introduction to the Match project. I have about 15 minutes, and a lot more will be unpacked in the panel discussion, which is the juicy part of today's webinar. So I am one of the focal points for the Match project, which is implemented in 4 EU member states and 2 African nations, Senegal and Nigeria. And the project facilitates circular mobility for addressing labor shortages in the 4 EU member states. So let me first start off with by saying that diversity itself is not the core goal of the Match project. We don't believe in diversity simply for the sake of diversity. Diversity is not an end goal. You do not conduct a number of trainings and therefore become a diverse person or a diverse company. It is a very dynamic and fluid concept, and it requires conscious and ongoing action. And how we define diversity is quite different. One person's concept or understanding of diversity, one company's appreciation of diversity could be quite different to another. It depends on many circumstances. Some of it is time, place, your own company's goals. So it's important to keep this in mind. In the context of match, we're talking mainly about ethnic and national diversity. Diversity here is one positive outcome of applying new approaches to recruitment. And this is the goal of match, to tap into underexplored and unexplored talent pools in Africa. And by doing this, by applying new solutions to recruitment to address long-standing labor shortages, companies can realize the benefits of diversity. And Mirta's already outlined some of those benefits, being increased productivity, economic growth, resilience to fluctuations in the market, which is particularly relevant right now. As I alluded to earlier, motivations to diversify your workplace vary. You often hear reference to the aging population in Europe. In the Netherlands, almost a quarter of Dutch employers indicate that they have a shortage of suitable personnel, which is hindering their production. And Dutch talent pools and EU talent pools are simply not enough to appease that demand. We're aware that there's a reduced number of graduates who are qualifying in areas that are most in demand. So young persons are not studying or training to fill the demand. There's an emergence of new occupations, particularly in the tech sector, which requires upskilling and reskilling, which takes time and money. And lastly, and arguably the least sustainable motivation, is corporate social responsibility to diversify the workplace. But whatever the reason, when well managed, diversity is great for the company and it's great for the Dutch economy. But as long as you can find the right people for the right jobs, there are devastating effects when there aren't enough people, or there aren't the right people for these jobs. Some of you may have seen the NOS article. Thanks, Mirta, for jumping to this slide. The NOS article on Monday, which outlined the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic. It mentioned, this article particularly, mentioned the demand for labor in the Netherlands across the board has reduced since the start of the pandemic, and that is unsurprising to most. But one important point in this article was that the professions that were most in demand in 2019 and even earlier are the same professions that are still most in demand now. And the urgency, the severity of that demand still exists. And is at the same level and is only increasing. So that indicates that with or without the COVID pandemic, there is still an aging population. There is still a demand for these skills. There is still a shortage of graduates within the Netherlands and within the EU. So this gives reason for the Match project, because with or without, we still need to address these long-standing labor shortages. And we can only expect this urgency to continue next year if new talent sources are not tapped into. I'm aware of who is in the audience today, and I'm aware that I am essentially preaching to the choir. I think you've joined this webinar because you are interested in diversity. You celebrate diversity. You're looking for ways to diversify your workplace as well. I think it's an unfortunate reality is that if companies are not interested in diversity, they're not interested in taking risks or applying innovative solutions, then they do not tend to engage in these discussions. For this reason, I think today's discussion is less about how we can benefit from diversity, or how does diversity help companies, because I think we're already aware of this, but how can we foster diversity under pandemic conditions? We're often told that diversity can be expensive. Perhaps right now it's not a priority. New talent sources are impeded by international travel restrictions, if we're talking about recruiting from Africa. And everybody's working from home now anyway. So these questions bring me to a not so subtle segue into talking about the Match project, and how the Match project can support us with labor market shortages that we're facing with or without the pandemic, and how diversity, brought about through innovative recruitment from Africa, can support the recovery from the pandemic. So there's more to unpack in the panel, but can we go back one slide, Mirta? Here we go, the Match project, a quick introduction for those who may not already be aware. This is a 3-year project which is funded by the European Commission. As mentioned, it's implemented in the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Italy, as well as Senegal and Nigeria. And the premise of this project is built on circular mobility to fill long-standing labor shortages in those European states. So labor shortages that are not appeased by recruiting from within the Netherlands or within the EU. We are looking to job seekers within Nigeria and Senegal to come to these 4 countries to fill shortages through work placements, temporary work placements of between 6 months and 2 years, to gain skills, to transfer knowledge and return to their home countries with an enhanced CV, with more skills, knowledge, cultural competencies that they gain during their work placement. So this is a win-win. The goals of the project are to promote circular mobility, to address labor shortages in Europe, also to promote the potential of Africa. I think within the Netherlands, we are more familiar with Nigeria and the potential of Nigeria, maybe less so with Senegal. And I do hope within the Match project, we can highlight the immense potential of Senegal and possibly even open doors for such schemes in other countries, which includes other African countries, but maybe other EU countries are interested in exploring circular mobility to fill their labor market shortages. And as I've mentioned, knowledge transfer and development at the individual level. So staff members, European staff members learning from the new recruits, but also Senegalese, Nigerians, gaining knowledge and competencies during their work placement. Development at company level from the boosted staff and talent, and also at an national economic level, economies can benefit immensely from circular mobility. Thanks, Mirta. Next slide. And so I have already outlined this article, but it comes as no surprise to anyone, I'm sure, about the labor market shortages in the Netherlands. This is something that has existed long before the pandemic and continues to exist to this day. We have this lovely photo of a gray-haired man fitting in with my my point about the aging labor market in the Netherlands, the aging, labor force in the Netherlands. Contrasted with the profile of somebody from Nigeria who is available to start working. We have collected a large list of profiles of job seekers from Nigeria and Senegal from various different professions and skills. Within this project, we do often talk about the ICT sector and also people with tech skills, but through discussions with employers, we've realized there are labor market shortages far beyond those who only have tech skills, but also within the medical sector, logistics, construction, management, the list goes on, and we are not restricting ourselves to focusing only on IT. But you can see a real quote from an ambitious person with 10 years experience in Nigeria and South Africa in the IT sector who is looking to come to the Netherlands and fill labor market shortages here. So just an example of the many profiles that we have to offer to employers who are interested and willing to tap into the potential of Africa. Next slide, thanks, Mirta. So what about the not so subtle elephant in the room, COVID-19? What does that mean? The fact that international travel is basically not permitted. Within this project, which we drafted and submitted to the European Commission in 2019, little did we know that mere weeks after the launch, we would be faced by a global pandemic, which has implicated not only our health, but also our economies. On a practical level, that means that candidates cannot at the moment physically travel to the Netherlands. So Mirta and I have thought very creatively, and because this project is so fluid and demand driven, we've been engaging heavily with Dutch employers to ensure that the project still meets its goals, but more than anything, that labor shortages are still addressed through this project. So actually, through the COVID-19 pandemic, there is a silver lining. It gives us more time to prepare both the candidates, the job seeker in Nigeria and Senegal, and the Dutch employer. We already had planned to have cultural orientation sessions with both companies and with the job seeker, but now we have a lot more time to foster that with both cultural and logistical preparations. There's more time for upskilling, mentoring, and training of candidates before they physically travel to the Netherlands. There's also the opportunity to facilitate remote work. So this is a great way for the new recruits to orientate themselves in the workplace, to get familiar with their role, to forge relationships with their staff, with their colleagues in the Netherlands before they actually come here. Mirta and I are in the process of exploring job fairs, hackathons, and virtual missions. Actually, this year, Mirta and I were supposed to travel to Senegal and Nigeria physically on a mission, bringing a delegation of private sector companies with us to showcase the talent within Africa. Obviously, that didn't happen. It may happen next year, but we are planning to do some virtual solutions to showcase these profiles and what Africa has to offer. Lastly, within this, let's say we're calling it an incubation period, there's greater opportunities for networking and representation in Africa. And this is great for Dutch companies who are looking for a stronger foothold in Nigeria and Senegal. Through this project and through recruiting staff based in Senegal and Nigeria, they therefore have representation of their company and can really broaden their network in these two countries and solidify their position. As a more local solution within the COVID-19 pandemic, we are also looking to recruit Senegalese and Nigerians who are based within the Schengen zone. This helps us to override that issue of international or intercontinental travel. We still want to adhere to the circular mobility aspect of this project. So the intention is always that upon completion of their work placement, the candidates return to their country of origin. So this is one of our limited interim solutions, but I think under the current circumstances, it will be attractive to employers. So then to summarize, this is what we are doing currently under the current circumstances to ensure that the project still addresses the goal of filling shortages in the Dutch labor market and giving opportunities to Senegalese, Nigerian job seekers to gain and develop their skills through work placements, whether they be remote or hopefully in person in the future. And some of those questions, if we circle back to what I was mentioning before, the concerns of employers about international recruitment being expensive, being time consuming, being challenging, and that currently under the pandemic, recruitment is not a priority. I think some of these points will come back in the panel. But let me also answer that this project is funded by the European Commission. It is heavily subsidized. The employers will be heavily subsidized by this funding. Therefore, the match scheme is cheaper than commercial international recruitment schemes out there. This benefits the employer directly. We're also working with a talent management agency called Aldalia. And Aldalia have at least a decade's worth of experience in Africa, and they have been able to match from the point of demanding a staff member to the recruitment of a staff member within 1 month's time. And that is much cheaper than waiting for Europe to train new recruits within the European talent pool. And then in terms of reduced demand for recruitment, this is something that I like to push back onto employers, because the question is, if not now, when? Because of COVID is not exactly, as we've seen, a reason to stop recruiting for these in-demand professions, these professions will still be in demand in 1 year, 2 years time. But if you take this opportunity to engage with the Match project, you can benefit from, of course, the reduced cost and our role as facilitators. So I often push this question back and say, well, if you don't see it as a priority right now, then when will you see it as a priority to recruit and fill these shortages? So this is my last slide, just a practical step for employers who are interested in engaging in this project. Under these circumstances, we are very fluid. This project really is tailor-made for companies. Therefore, the first step for companies is to reach out to Mirta and myself for an initial discussion so that we can understand your company needs and your interests. From there, we can gather CVs and profiles that are within the talent pool that we have access to, put together a short list of potential job seekers or of potential employees for your company, so that you can make the final decision. There are a couple of steps that go along the way, and of course there are opportunities for mentoring, training, virtual missions, as I've mentioned before, but this really is a case-by-case basis. And we are willing to adjust our modalities to meet the needs of companies in the Netherlands. So without extending further, I'd like to thank you for your time, to encourage you to reach out to us. And I think many of the questions that you might have, we can answer either through the panel or through the question and answers. Thanks, Mirta.
Thank you, Maya. It's very good for you to highlight that it's crucial for companies to use this time wisely and really fill up their talent pool. And it is true that to a large extent, there are still sectors that are actively seeking for professionals with specialist skills. Even before COVID has hit us, many countries, including the Netherlands, they have faced a skill mismatch, meaning that there's a discrepancy between the skills that are sought by employers and the skills possessed by individuals in the labor market. And in the Netherlands, as Maya explained, some of those bottleneck vacancies remain in health, education, ICT, and more engineering technical jobs. I would now like to introduce you to our panelists. And the first panelist that I would like to introduce is Kemo Kamara. He is the founder and CEO of OMEC, a premium digital and physical space dedicated to the social and economic development of African diaspora. He's born in Guinea and raised along 8 other siblings. Being educated and working in the United States for 15 years before moving to Germany for his master's degree. Kemo, could you tell us what motivated you to start OMEC and why did you think the Netherlands needed OMEC?
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction. Hey, hi everyone. I see there's like a chat and people introducing themselves on here. So yeah, like you say, I was was born in Guinea and then I moved to US just with this linear idea from like most people of African descent go, to like in the West to have like acquire this education and, good experience and maybe go back one day and, give back to the country. So like that was the reason I left Guinea. But I think after my education and I had, one of the few that had the opportunity to like overcome all the challenges and then had, was lucky enough to like work in, corporate in the banking sector that I wanted for many years and then left there and then went like in the manufacturing business sector. And then after that, 15 years later, being there and building community and then, making my way up, we decided to go to Germany for an opportunity. So then what happened is that I find myself in this space where doing my thesis during my master program about, diaspora, African diaspora potential, and how can you leverage that for socioeconomic development. And I did this survey and then talked to like over 200 people across like the US, Germany, France, the Netherlands, Belgium. What I realized is that, man, there's like this exponential number of like individual successful, talented people within the community and from across all level, background, sector, right? And then all of them were like really talking about something similar experience, regardless which continent or country they were living in. And then that, which matched also my experience of someone who, you know, like lived in Guinea, in Africa, lived in the US, lived in Europe. It's like, as a professional of African descent, irrespective of like which level you are in, there's like this in an equal access to opportunity, right? And so that was across everywhere. And then that's like the driving factor of like what we're talking about today, like diversity and inclusion, representation and all that stuff, which is, you know, obvious fact. But the second part that I find out is really, it was a little surprising to me, was also there was like this underlying current of a growing need within the, you know, like a diaspora community of connecting with other like-minded people, right? They wanted to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. So individually, these people are like really successful, but like that wasn't enough. They wanted to be part of something, you know, like that's bigger than themselves, like whether it is social change, like, you know, social justice, you know, all these things, they wanted to be part of that. And so having realized that and finding myself in that unique space, the question was like, what do I do with this? What do I do with this information, right? So that's where the idea of OMEC come from, like really from my personal experience, and then from this like research that I did, and then, you know, information that I found. So the idea is like, how do you build a space for this talented professional of African descent to find themselves, to remove themselves from this black box where they can come together and then leverage the unique talent, skill, expertise that they have, and create that opportunity that they think they are saying it doesn't exist, or it's not like equally given to them. How can they create that opportunity themselves, right? And so that is basically the idea for OMEC. So how do you create a space that make connection, collaboration simple for professionals of African descent? So once they are able to do that, see each other, then they can communicate, they can engage with each other and build trust, and then now like making an impact.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Camo. It's very good to hear that. Yeah, all the work you've done in creating a platform where the diaspora can really come together. Within the Match project, we also really recognize the importance of the diaspora. So we very much invite new talents, candidates that come to the Netherlands for their job placements to be connected to the diaspora, so that they will have a soft landing, as well as other feeling of being part of a larger community. So I would now like to introduce our second panelist, Dennis Darko. He has been working at PwC for almost 12 years. He's a Dutch chartered accountant and holds a post degree in financial risk management, focusing on IFRS financial reporting in combination with banking regulations, supporting banks in the implementation of complex regulation. He is a second generation Ghanaian Dutch, son of a Ghanaian immigrant that came to the Netherlands with the hope of a better future. Cultural differences and the benefits thereof are at the heart of his household, and he aims to expand this experience to PwC, but is also involved in various diversity and inclusion initiatives at PwC, in particular those aimed at embracing the richness of found in cultural differences and enforcing constructive behavior. He supports a number of social enterprises with pro bono advice, predominantly in the area of finance, but also those focusing on the development of Africa. And some of those initiatives, such as include 100 Weeks, Safisana, which is waste to waste energy operations, by Gen Z, a crowd equity platform investing in African SMEs. So it's quite a mouthful explaining who you are, Dennis. As we've heard today, diversity can take many shapes and forms. But what exactly does diversity within the workplace mean to you, and how has it played a part in your professional career or personal development?
Yes, thank you, Myrte, for the introduction. Quite long. If I'd known, I would have shortened it. In any case, let's move on. So yeah, indeed, been working at PwC since January 2009, which is almost 12 years now. I think when it comes to diversity and inclusion at PwC, we like using those terminologies separately, being diversity being what you see. So in terms of color and sometimes religion and maybe sometimes behavior. And the other side being inclusion, which is about the behavior towards the differences we see. Right. So that means you can have a diverse intake of people, but it doesn't mean that you have an inclusive intake, meaning you accept their religion, you accept their behavior, you accept, the gender, you accept all the differences that make up a human being. Right. So at PwC, we like to talk about both of those things. My personal experience when it comes to diversity and inclusion is when I started at PwC in January 2009. I think it's fair to say that I was one of the few Black people working at PwC, in particular working as a professional at PwC. So we're talking about 12 years ago. And we're now 12 years further. And if I look back, I think we have come a long way, a very long way. If you now look at our intake, it's very diverse. It's male, female, different religion, American, Asian, South African. They come from everywhere. The second challenge we're dealing with now is, making sure that those same people who have a diverse background also go up to leadership positions and get the promotion that they deserve. So this is a journey that we have been on for quite some time. But given the fact that we think it's very important, not only for business reasons, but also because it's part of humanity to accept each other for our differences and seeing the richness we can find in those differences. So what you now see, you can find in our transparency report on our website, is that we are making steps. As you can see, we have a good balance between male and female leadership positions. We can do better when it comes to cultural differences, but we're also working on those aspects. So including myself, I'm now a senior manager, which basically testifies to the efforts that PwC is showing in making sure that a diverse group of people get into those leadership positions, and also making sure that people like myself or others with a different way of thinking, different way of viewing things, different way of working are also accepted and appreciated for what they bring on table. So I think I'll keep it to this point, and maybe later on we can talk further about this. Thanks, Myrte.
Thank you so much, Dennis. It's very, very interesting to hear how you kind of paved the way for people after you joining the organization. And I must say, I'm very impressed by all the efforts taken by PwC. And I've also looked at some of the reports that you just mentioned, and there's many initiatives going on. So that's very encouraging to hear. So thank you for sharing your story. I would now like to introduce the third panelist of today, Robert Blauw. He's a consultant and partner at AIM for Interim Management. Robert has a degree in business administration from Nyenrode Business University, and he has worked for Manpower Group, which is a leading global workforce solution company, and connecting human capital to the power of business. During his time, he also worked as a general management of the for the Translation Center in the Netherlands, which kind of bridges the language barriers in an innovative and high quality manner. Since 2018, he became part of the AIM4 team, another organization that connects supply and demand for interim and permanent positions at tactical and strategic levels. And they provide, if I understand correctly, also coaching and development programs in the field of personal leadership. So Robert, very warm welcome to you as well. As we have people might understand, can you perhaps explain a little bit more from a recruitment perspective, whether you see any challenges that come with recruiting from diverse talent pools, how can companies, for example, address these?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Mirte, and also to IOM and NABC. First of all, I want to say it's a quote from Mr. Moore, William Moore. You don't just need talent, you also need the talent to use it. And I believe that everyone has got talent, and it's all about how to mobilize that talent. And that's a strong belief. In my company, I used a lot I hired a lot of migrants. And also we made, during the time of the interpreting agency, we developed more than 100 interpreters coming from social welfare into a program, and they ended up as independent interpreters. So that's first of all what my background is, and it works. I can it's untapped resource, and if there's a shortage, we had a shortage during the time of TVCN, currently known as Global Talk. In the meantime, they rebranded. It's very nice that there is a lot of potential available in Africa and yeah, also in the group of migrants. One of the challenges today is how to find the right person. I see it everywhere. I come in a lot of organizations, public and private, and to find migrants, it's not always easy to find them. If you have the policy to have a diverse population, it's not always easy to go into practice and to find the right people. I used to work with Vluchtelingenwerk Nederland. That was a very nice organization who gave me access to migrants, to those talents. And also, it's how do you say? Also for the people abroad or migrants, it's not always easy to find the right company. So there's a shortage, but how do you connect supply and yeah, and how do you say the demand and of labor, and it's not always easy to connect. So I think that's the first challenge. How do you, if you are an organization with a diverse policy, how do you find the right persons? And even if you find the right persons, how do you retain people? How are they sustainable employees? That's a difficult question, because sometimes there are bias in the organization, or there's no bridge from both sides, which closes the culture or language barrier. That's a gap to be closed. It needs work from both sides. I think that's also the case. I saw a lot of organizations who hired, for example, migrants, but at the end, it did not work because they didn't close the gap. And that's little things. For example, when Dutch people used to eat just a small example, eat bread with cheese and milk, and during the break they go to the canteen and they talk to each other. A lot of migrants do not know that, and they feel uncomfortable how to behave, or what is the behavior in a meeting room, for example. What can I say and what can I not say? So those are in practice and very small challenges, which creates a success or a moment that people leave the company again. So diverse policy means an active role from both sides. So I think that's a quick answer to your question.
Thank you so much. I think it is very, very complex. It's not just making sure that you recruit the right people, but also making sure that you retain them and creating a work environment that is inclusive to all. That actually touches upon a topic that I would like to ask Kemo. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about this, about the fact that sometimes we see a lot of public discourse focusing on inclusion of minorities. A lot of attention has also shifted currently to inclusion of migrants, refugees. We have, of course, the Black Lives Matter movement that has put really diversity and equality high on the agenda. But how do we ensure that minorities are not just simply seen as a short-term focus for a knee-jerk reaction for the responsible within the companies? How can we ensure that it's really a sustained effort, and who exactly should be held responsible within the company to upholding these measures?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. Because if you look at companies, a private company, they have the right to do whatever they want. And then at the end of the day, it's like, it's the private company, they care about the bottom line. So it's kind of hard. And I think like if you ask politicians, even if they want to do the right thing, it's kind of hard to like enforce that. But at the same time too, whatever impact the bottom line, I think like for the past 20 years, the diversity and inclusion pioneers have been like convincing and working hard at doing all these like studies after studies to prove like diversity is now a competitive advantage, and here's why. And you open your talk with like so many of like this reason why diversity is actually not just doesn't work, but it's a competitive advantage, right? And so that's been done for the past 10 years. If you look at Black Lives Matter movement that's happening, there's been like a lot of multinational companies that understand the importance of diversity, that understand it work, but they're still making money and with the system that they're using. So if it's not broken, why change it, right? Why go through the hard work when you can just write a nice PR and then it kind of gets a lot of likes and it works. And I think one thing, the silver lining with the Black Lives Matter movement is kind of like showing people, that's not gonna work anymore. And that's from the company side. But I think from the public side, it kind of triggered these things like, oh, listen, this is like window dressing is not working anymore, right? And it's creating that conscience within the community, within the population, within the consumer groups, like, okay, we're gonna hold you accountable to like things that you said. And so I think it's a twofold. One, companies that are not serious about this and still want to keep doing the same thing I call them the dinosaur. And so we all know what happened to the dinosaur. Their time is up, and it's just they can keep fighting or they can change. If they don't change, that's fine. We know what's gonna happen to dinosaur. But companies who really mean to change, right? Like, Dennis just given an example about like how PwC's culture is kind of company who want to make a change, then there's like so many opportunity now to make that happen. My first thing would be whoever is in charge of your diversity and inclusion, make someone who is part and center of like that, right? Someone who is a minority, understand it, lives it, breathes it, right? Then give them the possibility, give them the authority to make a decision, right? So then it becomes easier. If you kind of like, I say this from experience, because right now as an OMEC, I'm like talking to so many multinational companies, and you can see the difference between the decision maker who's a person of a diverse background. You're just talking about how do we make it happen. We're brainstorming about this, and other people who are not in that space, you're educating them. You're spending multiple hours educating them. So the things like put someone in that place that can drive that understanding and can drive it. That's one. The second side of it, within the community space, I think the way forward now is that communities need to start coming together to collaborate, to work together, to create this space, to like create almost this push relationship, right? So pull versus push, like the pull relationship is like, let's create a space, let's create our own table, let's uplift each other, let's create that opportunity that we want, that we are asking. Once we have something to say, now these companies can come to us. Now we have the power to say, I don't want to work for Nike. I don't want to work for Facebook. I'm just giving example like Nada, but we won't work for this company because you don't have our best interest in mind. And so once the community are able to do that, which is happening, OMEC is an example of that. Like we are creating a space where we can uplift each other, where we can be in the power position to like say, well, we want to have our members to go in this company and work there. What are you doing for us? So I think it's like a twofold now. The community really need to start coming together. For those who are activists, let's put a group together to like say, hey, this is what you say you're gonna do, and you're not doing it. And then we're gonna put you out there. We're gonna put on social media. You're not making it happen. And you have like a networking, group like OMEC or like a, like Afrotech or like, just a niche networking. Like I have this group, start having these conversations, start talking to each other. So I think it should be like on the both side. Company who want to make it happen, that's a huge opportunity to happen. And I think the community need to start coming together because collectively, that's where you have a saying, that's where you have a power. Individually, you don't exist. Once these two things happen, I think change will start definitely happening.
Thank you, Kemo. It's very interesting to see that you make the comparison with companies that are kind of resisting or not really embracing the message of diversity as dinosaurs who eventually will go extinct. Maybe Dennis, from your personal experience, could you perhaps also say how within PwC the company has benefited from diversity among its staff? Have you seen any tangible improvements in any way?
The answer is yes. I think the way I'm going to approach this question is that, when you look, there's an outside and an inside view. So looking from the outside view, being a third party, and you look at PwC, I think the first thing you notice that we have a diverse and inclusive workforce. I mean, you alluded to that, Myrte. You looked at our website, you probably heard of us, and you've probably heard that PwC is a front runner. And that's because we do a lot of marketing on that. But the other thing about the marketing is that in-house, it needs to be set right, because if you do a lot of marketing on being diverse and inclusive, but your household is not the same, then basically it's not authentic, right? And people will notice that. So at PwC internally, we make a lot of efforts to make sure that this diversity and inclusion agenda is taken very seriously. Right. So to give you a practical example, so when I think it was my third year, I got a lot of feedback on my performance during meetings where I got the feedback, Dennis, you're not participating actively in the meeting. Whereas I thought, what do you mean? Because I make all the minutes. I have the client contacts. Basically, I'm doing everything. So what do you mean I'm not active? So what I needed to do for myself is, try to figure out where this comes from. And I had discussions with my Western colleagues, and they also find it very difficult to pinpoint, what the point was here. So after some self-research, I found out that, the way I was brought up, being a Ghanaian, it has effect on how I work on the workplace. For instance, in a Ghanaian culture, I'm not going to talk about other African countries, I only know Ghana, is as growing up, you are not allowed to speak against authority. For instance, your mother or your father, you do not look them in the eye, and you only speak when you're asked to speak. Right. So this is something that I take up in my upbringing. So the moment I found out that this probably is the reason why people think I'm not active, I started working on it. And now in meetings, I make sure that I give input on 3 items. And now people totally forgot that they gave me that feedback back then. So the point I'm trying to make here is, there are 2 things that I think we need to take into account. There's one thing that the organization can do from a diversity and inclusion perspective, being all the programs that we are launching, for instance, for female, for gender, and for culture. The other side is that we need to look to ourselves as a community, as a people, and think about the things that we perhaps need to change, right? Because it takes 2 to tango. That means it's not only the other party that needs to change or come towards the middle point. But we both need to walk towards the middle point and find each other there. And what we have done at PwC is exactly that. We have a lot of dialogue sessions where we talk about implicit bias. For instance, why are Asians so quiet? We talk about those things, and we are not afraid to talk about those things. Because sometimes when you talk about these topics, you're afraid to hurt somebody else, or you're afraid that you're not understood. But really crossing the line and having that conversation in a safe environment, that is where we come close to each other, and that's how we as PwC develop to become more and more inclusive. And the effect you're seeing this day is that we have more diverse workforce in leadership positions, which was not the same 10 years ago. So that is a tangible effect we're seeing right now.
Thank you, Dennis. It's indeed very, very inspiring to hear, and yeah, very welcoming to hear you also explain some of your personal experiences, how your upbringing sometimes also led in different kind of communication style. I find it very interesting that you're talking about some unconscious bias, because I think that is sometimes a very prominent issue, which also plays a role in recruitment. Maybe Robert, maybe you can share a little bit more insight on this aspect as well. To what extent does personal bias play a role in recruitment? And could you share some examples of how companies can actually eliminate bias during their hiring process?
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to say that I agree with Kemo that a company must have true values. If you have a diverse policy, it takes something. You have to have an active role in the plan. If you look at bias, it comes first. The leaders of the company. How do you propagate your true values? That's very important. That's also the example for all employees in every company. It starts there. It means that you need to change your mind shift and look at a different view to new pools of talent. In my experience, it was the case to have a selection criteria as you hire a white Dutch guy or woman, but also look at soft criteria and also look at motivation and what is the will to be successful. And my experience is that a lot of people I hired with another country of origin than the Netherlands, that they had great learning skills. They were willing to be successful. Fantastic experiences. And of course, there are some problems as well. But if there is an openness in the company to learn from each other, and you can do that with a lot of techniques, and you can make it very practical again. A cultural workshop is very normal at the moment, where both nationalities are in the same group and learn from each other with a moderator or a trainer from the country of origin and who understands both cultures. So close that gap. That's an active role of both parties, I guess, to beat bias and also make fun. I also saw that it's fun with diverse staff because you can make an African day or a Senegal day or a Nigerian day. On Friday, people wear different clothes or casual clothes. Maybe you can wear African clothes on a casual Friday. Make it more fun. Make it easy to adapt, and also have intervention moments where people learn from each other. And for the other way around, I have also a suggestion that some migrants, there's a big gap towards the direct Dutch culture. We have a very difficult culture when we are equal to our supervisor, and we speak out our thoughts. We have no limitations in that, almost not, and it's different. And why shouldn't you add a mentor? It's not a supervisor, but a mentor to migrants to help them out. Little things. How do you behave? Also, what Dennis just said. I got this reaction from a Dutch guy, but what do I do wrong? Or do I do something wrong? Or how can I do it in a Dutch way? Or can I stay with my own opinion? Or etc. So I think bias, to beat bias, is something you do both. So the company, and with all its staff, and if there is obvious bias, yeah, you have to make it very clear that's not the future of the company, and that's not the way and the value of what the company should be. So that, yeah, I think it's very important to have make it very active, and when it comes back every time back to the agenda. Yeah.
Thank you, Robert. It's very, very good that you're highlighting also it's important to have fun and having a casual Friday where we're all dressing up in some more traditional African clothing. Within NABC, I must say, I'm very happy as well to be experiencing the foods and the culture of different cultures as well. So I fully agree on your message there. I think we actually have a couple of questions for the Q&A, which are actually with regards to the match project. So Maya, could you perhaps explain what is the process to submit profiles to NABC, and perhaps even combine this question on what the plans are for African students that are currently in the Netherlands that are having a search year. You explained, of course, the interim solution. How exactly, does this connect to this group?
Yeah, very good questions. Practically, as mentioned, we work with a talent agency called Aldalia, and I will type that in the chat. They have a job search platform called Ariba Jobs. And you are encouraged to upload your profile to the Ariba Jobs platform and indicate that you're interested in participating in the match project. So NABC and IOM are neutral when it comes to the selection of candidates. We play the role as facilitators. So we are not collecting nor making any decisions on CVs and applications. That's up to the selection panel and to the recruiting company themselves. So to answer that first question from Anonymous, I encourage you to upload your profile to the Ariba Jobs platform, and I will make sure that you all have the link to find that and to indicate your interest in the match project when doing so. Following on to the next question about the selection of candidates who are already within the EU. This is the same process. As mentioned, it is an interim solution during the COVID pandemic to recruit from within the EU. Hopefully things resume and we can continue with the project as planned with international travel from Nigeria and Senegal. But as part of the solution, we are open to applications from Nigerians and Senegalese nationals who are within the Schengen zone. So the same message to you is please upload your profile to the Ariba Jobs platform. You may want to mention which country you're currently based in. Thanks.
Thank you, Maya. I actually have another question for Campbell. What do you think are some of the most common mistakes in an organization's thinking about diversity? What do you think often goes wrong? Because sometimes companies are very embracing, but you don't see any results of, in terms of policy. Where do you think it goes wrong?
I would say the biggest thing, from my perspective, it's like company think diversity and inclusion as like a solution to the problem. You know, diversity and inclusion for me is like a band-aid, right? Like things was like really bad. Let's just put a band-aid on it. Let's stop the bleeding. But it's not the solution. It's not the long-term solution. So if you look at it from that perspective as an end, but it's just a mean to an end, like just figure out how you go, how you create really a space where everybody feel welcome, where we treat each other as a human. There's like this concept of like humanizing like the workplace. And I think like if you start treating diversity like, oh, let's bring a bunch of people from different background, from different ethnic group, from different age, and then put them together, and then like you actually creating more problem, right? And then the companies like find themselves like, oh, we've been called out. Let's bring more people. Let's go find like a black person or a female, or like put them here, and without really having to think about like what kind of space, what kind of culture, what kind of workplace that we want to bring, we want to create. Like think about your culture, and is it aligned to things that's happening, to the values? Like think about those things, right? And diversity just become a mean to get there. And it's like, especially nowadays, I would say post-COVID, post Black Lives Matter movement, like the future of workforce is, I think the concept of diversity and inclusion is gonna start going away. Right? If you start talking about diversity and inclusion, that means you're way behind. It should be like creating a space where you treat people as a human, right? And then like whether it's a female, whether it's people of African descent, how do you bring diverse people in this space where they can really maximize the potential of who they are as a human being, and bring that perspective, and then use that as a way for you to create like the best output that your competitive can never touch on. Because the truth is, we've been emphasizing so much on the human hard skill, and to the detriment of the soft skill. And now the things is like a flipping round. Like that soft skill that people bring to the table, especially people of a diverse background that speak like 4, 5, 6 different languages, that can navigate, like in the second between different cultures, understanding those like, or people who have a street smart, like, not only like a school book smart, they have like all these things. How do you tap into that just because their Dutch accent is not perfect, or their English accent is not perfect, and you're hindering them, right? How do you tap into that soft skill, that human side? Like companies who are able to do that are the future, are the winner. And yeah, if you are a big company, you probably need to figure out how you make that happen now. And if you are a startup, this is like a great opportunity to like create a space, create a team like that can just go and then get the market share. I think that's the future. I so believe in that. And I think that's the way forward. I think the sooner companies can realize that, the sooner society can realize that, the sooner, not even only company, the sooner even cities can start realizing that they will start becoming city of the future, or they'll just left behind.
Thank you so much, Camo. I see we have actually a very practical question to you, Dennis. Someone in the audience is actually asking how, with regards to the hiring process at PwC, if you mostly just hire people from their home country, or organizations also hire professionals that are already residing in the EU with some knowledge of the language and the culture. How exactly does PwC ensure that they have a very diverse workforce? How exactly does the process work?
I think there are a few angles I can take here. I mean, the first angle is that generally we do hire, at least in the Netherlands, we do hire EU workforce. That I think more has to do with practicality, right? EU passport, etc. But given the fact that we are a network organization, which means that we have PwC entities all over the world, what happens is that if, for instance, let me take the example of Ghana again, there is a PwC office in Ghana, which has a coverage for whole West Africa together with PwC Nigeria. So generally what you see is that you then apply for a job there. And once you get in, then basically the world of PwC is open to you. To give you an example, last year we had a short-term secondee coming from Ghana to the Netherlands for a period of 5 months. And the nice thing about that guy is, I think his name is Kwame, he came with his traditional clothes, he had no suit, and basically both clients as colleagues embraced him, and he did a very good job, right? So they even wanted to keep him here. but that wasn't allowed by his local office, so he needed to return. So in terms of tapping into potential on the Africa continent, I definitely think it's there. But going back to answering the question, generally you start local, and once you have been onboarded locally, then it's much easier to navigate through the PwC network.
Thank you,
I
Dennis.
hope that answers this question.
Yeah. I think we are the director of NBC has also worked for quite a long time at PwC, and he's also worked at different branches of PwC, including in Nigeria. So yeah, it's very interesting to hear that there's quite a lot of possibilities of inter-company transfer once you are indeed. There's actually a question in the chat I would like to address. It is a question from Nafek, and I'd like to address it to Robert. You have, of course, quite some experience working with translators, interpreters. So the question is actually regarding the people from the Nafek network who are not speaking fluently Dutch. They're experiencing a major obstacle to finding suitable work in the Netherlands. Do you think it's justified that, let me see if I scroll down. Do you think it's justified that many employers ask prospective employers to speak fluently Dutch, and how can we overcome this obstacle?
Yeah, that's always difficult. It depends on the organization you work at. If you work at an international organization, maybe English is a good language to talk. But if you are a Dutch company, for example, an energy company in the Netherlands, then speaking good Dutch is very, very important. And what is then good Netherlands? From my perspective, in a hospital, you have to speak at least B2 level. Yeah, that's the kind of status in Dutch or in a language. C2 is fluent, high-skilled, you speak a high-skilled language, and C1, you can speak quite well another language. For some companies, C1 really required, and then the organization who wants to hire you has certainly a good point. But sometimes, and a lot of companies, the level of language is not so important, and that's maybe a criterion not to. Yeah, maybe it's also a bias. Then that's the reason not to hire the people from another country and who doesn't speak the language well. So it's a difficult question to answer, but look at the background of the company. Maybe then you can increase your chances as well. A lot of companies, Dutch is not even required or at a low level. So yeah, but I also suggest to improve your Dutch if it's only A2 or B1. Then it must be improved. Yeah.
Can I add on to that, Meerte? I also want to add on to what Robert is saying, that increasingly we're seeing companies shift away from the very traditional form of recruitment and selection criteria. And this is out of necessity mainly, is that with the standard recruitment, we're not able to find the talent that we need. And this requires a shift in mindset, which is a theme that's come up throughout this discussion. But changing the status quo can be uncomfortable. It can require an entire change to your human resources department, or to the way that you look at your talent and manage your talent. And some companies may not be willing to do that. The consequence is, if you keep the status quo, if you retain your traditional recruitment where somebody has to have a CV and be in person, attending a job interview and passing a number of tests and having a number of criteria, then you're going to get the same talent over and over again. And as let's say the supply is depleted within the EU, you're going to see shortages, and you're going to suffer because you are not adjusting to the reality, which is that there are not enough Dutch speakers or EU-based talent to fill that shortage. What is required actually is for companies to adjust to the realities, to modernize and to think creatively and innovatively, to tap into these untapped sources of talent, and to adjust the status quo, to be open to changing what they've traditionally done. And while some professions, of course, do require fluent Dutch, I can understand, maybe there are some professions that don't, or maybe there are companies that are willing to fast track or provide language support or mentoring, or dual on-the-job training with language coaches plus work placements. So I think there's a lot of creative options to employers and companies that they should lean more heavily on as it becomes more and more difficult to find local talent.
And in addition to Maya, yeah, the talent pools in the Netherlands are limited, and it really stops productivity and growth of companies. So they have to amend to new ways of thinking. And yeah, look at the shops in Amsterdam. A lot of people are not talking Dutch to you in the shops, but also on the work floor. Yeah, the talents are not in the Netherlands, and we are a very small country with only Dutch, and the rest of the world does not speak Dutch. So we have to amend, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Robert and Maya. We've reached actually the end of this webinar. Thank you all for your very interesting insights. I would like to actually thank all our panelists for their valuable contribution. Robert, Dennis, and Camo, thank you all so very much for joining us and telling your personal experience regarding diversity and some of the lessons learned and challenges that we still see, discussing how we can even further make this a priority within companies. And as Maya might have already explained, we are this is actually a series of webinars focusing on the Match project. So please make sure to join us again, or you are always very free to reach out to us if you have any questions. And yeah, let me see. Here we go. So here are the email addresses where if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. I saw there was actually a question regarding the recruitment within the EU. We will make sure to also include that in the email that you will all receive, including the recording of today's session. So thank you all. Please stay safe. I wish you a very happy Diversity Day. And we look forward to be further connecting with you in the near future.